Charlie's out there. And I will call the Wednesday, May 4th, 2022 meeting to order. Actually, it is great to see you in person. Thank you, our guests who are coming with us. I'm looking forward to getting into a deeper conversation about the blue lines, so we're going to have that for our council especially. Normally we've met when we're in council meetings in our chambers, and then committee of the whole in a dark, deep basement. So we're actually a special treat. So we actually can fit in a room as well. So that's wide eye.
Please come more often.
We did that for you.
Because of us, if that's the case,
This is kind of like guests come, we bring out the nice china.
Oh, okay, well, I'll self-invite more often,
Thank you. First order of business is approval of the agenda, which I have been advised we have been doing without a motion, but now that we're in person, we're going to do some things that we didn't do before, but we're not going to do a roll call. So, is there a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That has been approved. Now the minutes, which were from our meeting on April 20th. If there's any corrections, additions, you can let us know. Otherwise, if there is a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Move approval.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second by Gonzalez, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay? All right, we have two business items today before we get to our special information session. Pursuant to the bylaws, we may consider time-critical business items at our committee of the whole, which we don't normally do. But we can do that since, as a governing body, we're all here. The first item is on the consent agenda, business item 2021-110, the Intergovernmental Agreement with Hennepin County. Those from Hennepin County are probably pretty curious. I had to look this up, so 923, may I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda?
Approval.
Thank you, second?
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Chambers. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carried. Now to a non-consent item, reports from the standing committee. We have a report from the Environment Committee, business item 2022-108, Water Efficiency Grant Program Awards. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is one of my favorite topics, which is our water efficiency grants. We have $1 million that we are allocating, or that I am asking that the council allocate this year to 37 different cities for water efficiency projects across the metro area. And so this is all about technical and behavioral changes. So we give out these grants, and then cities will implement like rebate programs for smart meters, smart water meters, or other water efficient appliances, things of that nature. They're very popular amongst the residents and amongst the cities. And so the grants are, it's 80%, usually 80% is our money, and then there's a city component to it, 20%. So they're between 5,000 on the low end and 50,000 on the larger end. They're from the clean water funds, so the state funds, clean water funds. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the Met Council authorize its regional administrator to award and execute the Water Efficiency Grant Program grants recommended in attachment A of the business item in the total amount of $997,920.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Wolf seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carried. Congratulations. Thank you. So we're on to our one information item, which is about the Blue Line extension route modification, and that is out in the public. It should not be mystery to any of us for all the work that this team has been doing. And we're gonna hear from Nick Landwer, Sophia Ginis, and Dan Solar. But first, I just want to acknowledge, and we've been saying hello to our two guests, the Hennepin County Commissioners Irene Fernando and Jeffrey Lunda. Commissioner Lundy represents District 1, and Commissioner Fernando represents District 2. They have been inextricably engaged every step of the way.
That's a word.
And we will, I'm using that word, I'm using big words for a big project, and I think that we'll listen to your perspectives, and it's great that you could be here and kind of talk it through and also kind of get some reaction. But those who have been engaged in the CMC, the Blue Line, and there's a number of us here who have, we know how much work has gone in to this project in the past year and a half, especially, and many years. And I should acknowledge that Dan, who was part of the Met Council, managing the Bottom Line, didn't skip a beat, now being part of Hennepin County. And really, that word inextricably is really being attached to the project team on this process. So with that, welcome, and we look forward to hearing the presentation and having a conversation.
So I'm Sophia Ginis. I manage public involvement for the process. I'm also with Nick Landwer and Dan as they introduced. I'm going to start us off by kind of going through the 18-month process that we've been doing so far. Dan is going to talk a little bit about the anti-displacement work and then getting into the technical recommendations of why we're recommending the route we are to you. And of course, we have our commissioners, so welcome to them. We also look forward to hearing from them. It's been, as you noted, a very close partnership in developing this project along the way. So with that, for folks' background, we're extending the Blue Line, so 1-seat ride, going from Target Field, heading up to our northwestern suburbs. You all get all the way down to Bloomington if you want to once we're finished with this. Critical piece of the project was in August of 2020, this body in Hennepin County decided it was time to pivot away from the freight rail alignment. The kind of yellow part of that map, which is the majority of the project, was shared with the BNSF corridor. And after multiple efforts by folks in this room and not getting BNSF to budge, we, with our partners, started to make that pivot to find another solution so that we could deliver this critical regional investment, and particularly for this part of Hennepin County, which has some of the most underserved areas in Hennepin County, and diverse. So how do you keep a project similar, but look at it again? And the map on the screen kind of shows almost amalgamation of our process, which was we kind of took our overall alignment and divided it into that kind of, on the screen it looks yellow, kind of orange and blue areas that represented distinct challenges that we needed to get through. So in Brooklyn Park, where former mayor helped us through that process, we knew we could keep our station areas basically as they were. In the middle section, while we looked at potential other options in kind of an early screening, that we basically knew that County Road 81 was our leading option. And then in the Minneapolis area, went through a more robust process to make sure that we had looked at all the options, but really kind of narrowing in a couple main routes on West Broadway and Lowry, and a whole bunch of link segments that also went through a pretty comprehensive process to narrow down. To make sure that this process was robust, we had very distinct phases of the project that basically provided the public and all of you with more information to kind of make sure that we were continuing to go in the right direction as we progressed. So that was, we spent quite a bit of time with our communities getting used to the idea that we were looking at something different. We're also in the middle of a pandemic, right? So just being sensitive to all the things that were going on, especially, and also all the social challenges that we had to overcome within that time, from attacks on our Asian community to, the list is long. But, releasing initial routes, starting to add what stations would look like, taking that kind of hard to understand engineering and actually making it visual and easier to conceptualize. Dan will showcase a little bit of that work later on. And then releasing our draft route modification report, which did not contain a recommendation. That might have seemed a little bit unusual to folks, but it was intentional because what we were doing was we were giving the community the space to say, are we reflecting bias in our work? And if we are, what is it, so that we can change it before we make an official recommendation, which is harder to pull back. And then we get to today. So, in these various steps that we took, it was really founded in community engagement. So every time we release new sets of information, we had questions for the community to help keep us on track, build the project, and keep going. As Dan will highlight in a little bit, the anti-displacement work was something that we did not anticipate in this community engagement process, but it came out from having a very robust and intentional process. Part of that also can be attributed to our community engagement cohort. This project has taken a very unique model, kind of contracting directly with community and cultural-based organizations. We've had multiple rounds of this. It's been the Hennepin County Contracting has helped facilitate that, so been good partners on that front as well. And really, these contracting with groups that both have important constituencies within our corridor, or can reach more deeply into communities that need more attention to reach, whether that's because of language barriers or various other things. So and these projects are super complicated, right? Like the acronym soup, the technical detail, working very closely with these groups also helped us increase the capacity of our community-based organizations to understand the project in a deeper way, so that they could also do that with the broader world, in addition to the work that project staff was doing. We also had a very robust committee decision-making process. So, we often get asked, what's your staff doing, right? It was all based in working very collaboratively with stakeholders through the entire process. So whether that was your city partners kind of on the technical side, to very active community and business advisory committees, and then many of you sitting on our corridor management committee. So with all of that, we had over 300 events. Some were even hosted by our commissioners. We appreciated that greatly, as well as our council members to connect with their communities, having over 11,000 points of contact. Did a ton of other, in addition to direct outreach such as door knocking, robust communications program, as well as other things like postcards and phone calls and all that kind of stuff. So while we were a lean team, we did quite a lot in terms of getting into our community and making sure that as many folks as possible. Councilmember Lindstrom and I were joking at the beginning, right, that no matter where you're on the process, people will express that they are not engaged. So we're picking some new folks up right now in this process, and we'll continue to do so, but the door is open for that as we go forward. And we tried to do our best to get the attention of as many folks as we could along the way. We had about 500 comments on the draft report. I won't go too much into this, but it helped us kind of advance. And when we got to the stage of having the draft report, we got some good suggestions and some new information, but most of it was not a surprise. We had heard from the community through the process. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Sophia. What a robust community engagement we had. And let's not forget that this community engagement was done, those dates would show you we were in the heart, a lot of it was in the heart of COVID time. And so we had to get real creative, and Sophia and Sam and their team, we came up with all kinds of, from virtual meetings to in-person meetings, to when we could do in-person meetings and we couldn't do them again, and then we could do them again. And so we tried some things, we had an interactive map that let people just simply go on and just put comments right on a map. And we got hundreds and hundreds of comments via that methodology. So we came up with a lot of different things.
Driveway events.
Driveway events, we stood in people's driveways and Commissioner Lenny said, well, maybe the big event isn't a thing anymore. But outside, we were in the mayor's driveway in Robbinsdale, we were in city parks. We had as little as 2 or 3 people and as many as 20 or 30 people at those various events. But having been working on this project since 2015, when we and all 3 of us on our team here all were there when we started, when the alignment was different and the time was different, 2015, 7 years ago, getting started, the typical things of working on the engineering challenges, and those were all part of the project. On the restart, as we came back together, and especially and probably more intentionally, because we weren't on the railroad corridor anymore, and we were proposing street running LRT, like we have along the Green Line in a lot of spots. The idea of concerns over, and also because we were, now newly in North Minneapolis, the concerns about displacement, about gentrification, about impacts to property owners was something that came up almost from day one at every meeting that we did. And I remember distinctly my colleague, Sam O'Connell, I called her on the phone after one of the meetings and said, we gotta do something about displacement. Obviously on this project, that's something we hear all the time. So if that keeps coming up, we aren't gonna be able to just say, well, it's part of the project. It's gonna have to distinctly be part of the project. So we talked about how can we build a working group or a consultant help, or how can we put together an anti-working group piece of this project that primarily does the goal, which you see up on the screen, which is to have a group that advises and it creates implementable recommendations. Now, we know maybe not every one of these recommendations may be implementable, but at least we're going to try. And we're gonna find the right entity and we're gonna, bring those pieces forward. So we wanted to put a team together that did that. We didn't think we had the expertise amongst ourselves to do that. We wanted to get a third-party facilitator to help with that. We thought this was something that would be done throughout the project because it'll change during design versus during environmental studies versus during construction. And we wanted to really pull that together. We also brought this forward and got tremendous support, both from Met Council Chair and Met Council members, as well as County Board. Go for it, give it a go. This is an important piece. So we brought some of that out to the community and said, help us develop what this group might look like and help us with the RFP. To the extent that really for the first time that I can remember, we reviewed and scored RFPs for the Anti-Displacement Working Group with staff members and community members, providing input and ranking the RFPs itself, which was kind of unheralded in all my time in doing that, but it was a means to get that input on what did folks think about the proposals that we had seen. So we heard a lot about keep it local. There's people all around the country doing things. We think we might be one of the most cutting edge in terms of what we're doing around anti-displacement in a large capital project here in the Twin Cities between Hennepin County and Met Council. But there's other people doing it, but this needs to be somebody local, somebody that knows North Minneapolis, that knows Robbinsdale, that knows Brooklyn Park and Crystal and this thing. We need them to be able to put together implementable solutions during the project. Let's look at what we've done. Case studies. I had the great privilege of spending 5 years as a director of construction on Central Corridor and building that in front of 2,000 businesses. Did some things really, really good. We needed some work on some other ones. What did we learn? What was good? What was positive? How do we build those experiences in to how we do this work? And so that will all be part of it. So we did an RFP. We selected a group. The group has been formed. It is being led by CURA, Center for Urban and Regional Affairs at the University of Minnesota, C. Terrence Anderson, a former Met Council Metro Transit employee. At Kira is the lead facilitator for that group. So they're the staff to the Anti-Displacement Working Group. There was about 75 applicants for the 12 spots on the work group itself. It was from what I understand from C. Terrence and his team, which did interviews with all these people and picked them, it was a lot of really good people. And so the work group has been formed with representatives from the community, with representatives from philanthropic groups, with representatives from business organizations and community organizations in and around the quarter. And that's the base working group. We as government sit on the side, and we each have representatives that then bring back and have formed internal working groups. Hennepin County has an internal working group that we will have, Met Council will as well as the various cities, all with the purpose of developing recommendations, bringing this forward and saying what kind of things might we do in association with this large capital project, which is gonna have an impact, both positive and negative, both during construction and then over the long term, to help it be a project not just through these communities, but for these communities, in these communities, to serve these communities, and hopefully to provide tremendous economic benefit to the communities where it's being built. I mean, that's what's key. The end result is a project that is successful, that provides a transportation solution for the people that live there, and helps spur economic development in that area. So one of the things that has been suggested is this first cut timeline will be done with several all-day meetings on Saturdays. Commitment from everyone to do that. This was a very big piece. Are you committed to spending that time? So in May, September, October, and February, starting that May 2022 is actually June 4 now. That date's been set. That'll be the first meeting, and we're gonna, the project team's gonna take care of this, and internal groups will work in between there, and we'll advance this work. So the goal here is really to then set the stage for anti-displacement and then follow through with recommendations moving forward. So very exciting work, very cooperatively put together. We put this together with project funding because we want this to be not something we're doing in association with the Blue Line Extension Project. We want it to be part of the Blue Line Extension Project. So we're using the project funds, and as Met Council in Hennepin County, we'll continue to develop this plan. So
Okay.
Nick is gonna take us on.
Where
Oh, he's gonna
are
hold
we
it.
today?
I'll hold it up. This is the report, right here.
So, yes, today, our route
A
recommendation.
real
report-
hard copy.
Yeah, a real hard copy. So it is available online. So, yes, as we're, where we are today and what we've rolled out to the public on April 18th, for a 30-day review process and comment, is our route recommendation. And this is the map that we're pretty excited to roll out with their recommended route from staff. So again, this is a continuation of our existing Blue Line alignment that right now has a terminus at Target Field Station. We will continue from this extension from Target Field Station, and as we leave Target Field Station, you can see on the map there's down in the corner there's like a little triangle, and there's some areas here where we still have evaluation and some options to look at. But as we come off of Target Field Station onto the 6th, 7th interchange, we're taking a look at moving down 6th to an East Lyndale alignment. That would take us over a 94, or another option that we're looking at is 7th Street, the diagonal that's shown through there. That would take us over to 94. We would go over 94 up Lyndale Avenue. We show some station locations, proposed station locations in this area. Plymouth Avenue Station has been a very requested area because there's a lot of training in that area, jobs. The V3 Sports Center is looking at developing in that area as a destination. So really a key location. Coming up Lyndale Avenue to West Broadway. So as we get to West Broadway
in between Lindale Avenue and Irving. We show two options there also. As we look at West Broadway, it's very constrained right away in there, and when you start putting in the light rail alignment, the roadway section, and then you start to try to fit stations in there, it starts to become crowded, and there are some impacts with that. So to look at how we could mitigate for impacts there, we said let's evaluate how we could bring in a 21st Avenue with that. Is that a way to maybe have a roadway pair? Maybe we put light rail up on 21st, or maybe we keep light rail and split the roadway through that area. So that's part of our options that we're evaluating in that section. And we would want a station in that area that would connect with the D line that's being constructed around the Emerson Fremont area. As we continue on along West Broadway, again, as we get up close to Penn Avenue, that's another area that we're recommending a station in that area where we'd have a good connection onto C line. And then we continue up West Broadway to North Memorial and actually Lowry Avenue. So we're looking at a station there that we're considering naming Lowry Avenue Station. Maybe it'll be a very long name with some other things there. Lowry Avenue, Theodore Parkway, North Memorial Station, but we'll have to dial that down. But this is another opportunity with this project, with the pivot, is to serve North Memorial. That was something in the original project alignment, everybody was coming in saying, you know, how can you get to the hospital? How can you get us there? And so this was an opportunity with this pivot as we looked at it. From this location on, we are now on County Road 81, or Botno Boulevard, as it's also known, and through the city of Robbinsdale, moving northward. We're looking at a station in that downtown Robbinsdale area, and you know, this is one where we'll have to work with the community, with the city to get the footprint of that, and where it's located, you know, in about a three and a half block area. But we want to make sure that we're working with them, that we fit that within context of the downtown there and how they would like to develop. Continuing northward, the section of Botno Boulevard, County Road 81 turns a little bit different. It goes from more of a downtown segment to a 6-lane roadway now, a little higher speed. Intersections are farther apart there. So a little bit different as we look at the alignment through there. But this is where we start aligning back up with where our previous alignment was, at Bass Lake Road, where we have a station identified there. This is before we were just off to the west of County Road 81 with the station at Bass Lake Road. We will move that station over to the middle of the road, you know, which is only about 100 feet away, so we're getting real close to where our previous alignment was. And then continuing northward to 63rd Avenue, the same thing there. We had a station before at 63rd. We're proposing to keep that station and pretty much the same location, just moved over 100 feet or so. And then as we move north up into Brooklyn Park, that's where we can join back up with where we had our previous alignment. Our alignment through West Broadway and Brooklyn Park was not affected by the freight rail corridor and alignment. We were on West Broadway, so we're able to continue with that alignment with the stations that we identified there at Brooklyn Boulevard, 85th Avenue, 93rd Avenue, and then at the very north end, Elk Grove. So there's a really good map, just a good visual to show the route in comparison to our previous alignment. So in the, I guess it would be on the left-hand side, you can see the previous alignment as it went down Folsom Memorial Highway to the freight rail corridor. Along there, you can see how we tried to keep our commitments with the communities to mirror some of the stations that we had before previously, and how to fit those into the community. So again, you know, the effort when we started here was to try to maintain that previous alignment and route and keep the commitments to the communities that we had. But also, again, as I said before, that there are new opportunities to serve the cultural and economic heart of North Minneapolis. Before, when we were going down Folsom Memorial Highway, we were serving North Minneapolis, but in a way it seems like we were maybe kind of skirting it, and now we're able to get to that heart of North Minneapolis and commercial area with the West Broadway alignment. So, talking a little bit about the purpose of the report, and Sophia touched on this a bit at the beginning, but The purpose of this was to document all the work that we've done, all the community outreach, the input that we've had, the technical work that we've done on this. And since we released our new route options in March 2021. So again, this evaluates and incorporates the public input and the engagement efforts that we've done, all that extensive work. It's showing we're trying to show our homework here so people can see the technical work we do and how that informed our route modification. And then what we did with the route options here is we evaluated them against our project principles and project goals. So, you know, we have a table there that they're side by side, but really what we were rating each one of them up were on our principles and our 6 project goals going forward. So, in the report, we use an assessment scale of poor, good, and excellent, so we can quantify those a bit. Obviously, in the report, if it was poor, it dropped off before we got to the report, and we really didn't evaluate it. So, as we look at the report, good, it really means that it serves the project goals, it provides benefit to the community that it's in, and it's a good option. I mean, it would make good light rail. Excellent means that it really had some unique characteristics and/or the potential to deliver exemplary benefits to the community and serve where light rail would serve well. So the next matrix is just really encapsulates the whole report here, but again shows the different segments or the different options and segments that we had along the option and how it rates them against the 6 goals that you see on the left-hand side. So again, as I pointed out earlier, Botna Boulevard, we broke that into 2 segments, and the city of Robbinsdale brought this one up to say, you know, you're more downtown feel. This is a different operating section than up in Crystal. So we split those 2 apart to evaluate those against our goals. But then, you know, where the bigger choice came was Lowry Avenue route or the West Broadway route, and you know, comparing those 2 against the project goals and how they fit in, and you can see that all of the alignment along here was good, if not excellent, along there. And as we look at Lowry and West Broadway, Lowry would have been a very good route to follow forward with, but the West Broadway really had some things that really stood out a little bit more and served the community there a little bit better, as we felt. So, you know, we have a few more excellence there in our rating to our project goals. So I think we're going to get in a little bit more of examples of how they fit the goals in a little bit more detail. So
Thanks, Nick. I mean, this was always tough, right? Because here we weren't, especially when we looked at Lowry versus West Broadway, you don't see one as really poor and one as really good. So we had 2 communities that were both feeling, you know, kind of the Lowry and Washington community were like, well, we really think light rail would work here, and it would. And the West Broadway community thought, yeah, but they're both correct. We can only build it in one spot. Some people did say, well, why don't you just build both routes? You know how hard it is to build a light rail line? Yeah, I mean, building 2, that might be tough. Plus, I don't know, so people realize these are kind of expensive. So, so we looked at, I'm gonna just, you know, if you really want, I mean, people can go deep. We're gonna bring up 2 of the goals that were part of this study, the first one and the 6th one. The first one is really the bread and butter of you know, transit work is, you know, this is, how are we meeting the goal of actually improving transit access, serving destinations, and serving people? You know, are there connections to jobs and destinations? What might be the expected use of this line? That's the goal that was put forth. And here's a couple things that differentiated Lowry and Washington from each other. So you can see on this map is identifying the walk shed areas to the stations along Lowry and along Washington Avenue. So, you know, where you got a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute walk or a 15-minute walk, depending on the colors. And you see around the Lowry stations, it does real well, right? It captures all those areas very well, but the stations along the east side of I-94, the freeway is a barrier, right? You can only cross so many times, you can't cross everywhere. And so there's a lot of a gap, that kind of hatched out gap on the west side of the freeway where all those people are more than, you know, 15 or 20 minutes from a walkway to a station. That's a big heavy chunk of residential area in North Minneapolis that that gets far. So when you compare that against, well, what if we built this along West Broadway, you can see the West Broadway alignment now is green, the stations at West Broadway at Penn, West Broadway in Emerson, Lindale and Plymouth and downtown means almost everything is of a light blue color, and a light blue color is a 15-minute walk to a station. So it really provides almost all of North Minneapolis and that whole southern part with the North Memorial Lowry Station, the whole southern part of Robbinsdale within a 15-minute walk. And so, again, both of them were good. West Broadway, just a little bit better in terms of access to stations. The next map shows a little bit about destinations. And so, in this case, again, they're both pretty good. The purple are destinations in and around access to the Lowry stations. And so if you add up all those numbers, I don't know what it is, but it's a pretty high number of destinations. But the green is even higher, close to 200 regional destinations, all the way from worship spaces to restaurants to significant destinations like the Capri or Minneapolis School District headquarters, down to local destinations like local restaurants and not that, as Commissioner Fernando will remind us all, not that there's a lot of, in fact, maybe no good restaurants or places to eat yet in North Minneapolis. And so that's part of it. It shows both alignments have destinations in and around that North Memorial area. So these are just, there's a lot of this data back up in the report, but these are just two of the things that help kind of push West Broadway as a more preferable route on this south end than Lowry. Goal 6, we also wanted to highlight today because this is very key to both of our organizations at Hennepin County and Met Council, providing equity, reducing racial disparities, making Twin Cities a better place for everyone is key. And so how do either of these and this entire issue of routes advance local and regional equity? How does it work towards reducing racial disparities and those kind of pieces? This is very powerful information here. We had a very good report from the university's project. Sophia, what was the,
Mapping prejudice.
Mapping prejudice, thank you, Commissioner, yes. And so the issue of redlining, the issue of racial covenants, we had a project team presentation from that, very powerful information. This map shows where historic, where the original homeowners loan corporation areas where it's good or not so good to build houses shows up, where there was redlining, where there was, they were making lending inaccessible. And so you can see a lot of red and a lot of yellow is North Minneapolis. And so we also looked at some maps that we don't have today that showed, where racial covenants were put in place. And, I mean, I hate to say this, but the Robbinsdale border is a pretty firm border of where that is. So the ability to try to build this alignment on this line will hopefully provide opportunities to put public investments in area that have been significantly disinvested in the future. So that's one of the reasons why, again, both do this, but again, West Broadway really goes through this much better. We also looked a little bit about neighborhood impact, and you can see where up along Lowry, we're in a very big grid pattern up there, and there aren't very many traffic signals today, and so that map even represents adding a few signals. Otherwise, all those cross streets are likely gonna, LRT comes right down the middle of the road, are likely gonna have to be closed. It really helps, it really significantly changes the ability to have local neighborhood movement. Whereas along West Broadway, there are already more signals in place. It's not quite as it's very much a non-grid pattern because it's kind of goes east-west and north-south and diagonal through there. And so it better allows local movements for people to move around, which again is a very critical piece in terms of, how we equitably serve these neighborhoods and move people through. And so that again, put the nod there. So those are just a couple of the goals. This, the report is basically all been pulled together to say with these examples, a lot of maps in here that go all along that help guide us to the recommendation that Nick provided before. So what's this all gonna look like? I mean, what is it, can we do this? Can we really build this? So we put together what we call glimpses, these are called glimpses. So it's a glimpse of what does it look like today versus what might it look like in the future. This is a typical section of West Broadway today. This happens to be right about Newton and, you know, I shouldn't say typical, there aren't a lot of in-place landscaped medians on West Broadway. But this is one spot where that is the case along here. This is very close to where that the tornado went through and where the curve is, and Sherman is building some housing right in through there. But in general, a lot of West Broadway today is a 4-lane road with parking in some spots, limited parking in others, but on-street parking in many spots. 4 lanes, sometimes turn lanes, sometimes not, sidewalks on the outside. So this is pretty typical. This is, I don't want people to think, boy, this isn't very green. This is not even design yet. This is concept layouts. But in general, this shows, this is what, from a character standpoint, changes on the road. We take a 4-lane roadway with parking and we put LRT in the middle. We change it from a 4-lane road to a single lane in each direction. Continue to provide sidewalks on the outside. This is a general concept of what the West Broadway sections will look like. Where there are traffic signals, we're gonna have to introduce some left turn lanes. We have to widen it out a little bit, but for the most part, it generally fits. With one big exception, I know this well, taking away 900 parking spaces on University Avenue, we're gonna take away all the on-street parking here, which we get a lot of, well, how are you gonna deal with that? We gotta find a way to mitigate it, and we will. But it's parking on street is not a guarantee everywhere, and so, but the businesses are very curious, how will we mitigate the loss of on-street parking? That'll be part of our environmental work, that'll be part of what we have to determine. So when we were building this project on the railroad back in the day, and that's where we were gonna go, Hennepin County was advancing a project to replace the 2 bridges on West Broadway just at the Robbinsdale, Minneapolis border. The bridges were deficient. In fact, right before we started the work, one of them was actually closed because it couldn't take the weight limits anymore. And so the county had applied for federal funds. The county had federal funds in place. We had a design done. We were ready to move forward. We had to move forward to rebuild the bridges. And the rebuilt bridges are kind of as you see them in the drawing there. As a result of that, now we come back and say, ooh, now we want to put light rail through here. Well, there isn't really room between them. The bridges aren't ready for them. We got some other issues we need to work around North Memorial Hospital and how we serve, how they get deliveries, parking, how they provide their frontage road. So the concept we have now is we will come up to center of West Broadway and then we will go up in the air. You can see, if you look at the drawing on the left, the LRT tracks are what come up over southbound West Broadway, and then they'll swing to the west of those new bridges on a bridge. And we will provide a station elevated right about at the corner of the hospital. A little bit, I mean, the station will be a little bit like Franklin. It'll be a little bit, maybe like Lake Street, like that. It'll be elevated. There won't be a roadway with it though. It'll be just a station. I can tell you this, the county likes this because we're able to move around the new bridges. The park board likes this a lot because the station would have an access down to the grand rounds. So it's also on, those bridges kind of cross across their property, but we've been working with the park board about that access. The hospital likes this because it preserves their frontage road and it provides the potential for this elevated station to have a direct connection into the parking structure and more prevalently with a skyway into the hospital itself, and it could serve that directly. So we've worked with North Memorial and they are in general, without all the details, in favor of this kind of a station. This would stay in the air and go over Abbott, which is the signal that goes in right next to the hospital, and then come down and continue at grade again. So in downtown Robbinsdale, this is really right north of 40th Street, so there's a strip mall on the left and a strip mall on the right. The one on the left is kind of elevated. If you happen to utilize Bill's Gun Range, you know that access to the left, that's right in that shopping center there. There's a shopping center on the other side. It is a 4-lane roadway through Robbinsdale, and our determination is it needs to be a 4-lane roadway after as well. So it would look something like this. Again, we're putting LRT in the middle, we're keeping a 4-lane road, we're pushing it out. Any pushing of the road out tends to be more to the right side of the drawing than the left because of the elevated area of the parking there. But again, our analysis says this fits, that LRT can be constructed here without significantly buying a lot of properties. A station is gonna go in here somewhere in downtown Robbinsdale. It might be north or south of 40th, it might be right at 41st, unknown yet. That'll have to be part of this. And our last piece is here in Crystal. You can see this roadway is, still fairly recently reconstructed, but this segment of Crystal is 6 lanes, 3 lanes each direction. Frontage roads on both sides, very little direct access. This almost acts like a freeway, not a freeway, but a urban highway through here. It does have more capacity than it needs. Maybe we unknowingly had foresight and said, well, let's build a 6 lane because we might need 2 of the lanes for LRT in the future. We're gonna go with that. And so this is a little bit about what this looks like here. We've analyzed this as a project team. We believe that we can take the 6 lanes down to 4 without negatively impacting throughput on the roadway. And of course, adding the capacity that LRT brings overall to move people. We may build an interchange over Bass Lake Road to help take that away, but you can see we pretty much fit this in here as well. So those are several, we use these glimpses as a means to help people, what is this gonna be like? When you're at public meetings, people are, how does that? So the technology today lets us put things like this together so people can at least get a concept of what this may look like, have them understand it. These aren't engineering drawings, we're not ready to go to construction on this, but at least gives us a start on where we're gonna go. So with that, Nick's gonna finish next steps, and then we'll have some words from the commissioner and commissioners and some questions.
Yeah, sounds good.
So from here out, our next steps are, again, we have this route modification recommendation report out. That public comment period closes on May 18th. From that, we'll compile some of the comments coming out there, have maybe a memorandum that characterizes how those are coming forward, and we'll formalize our staff recommendation. So in June, the Corridor Management Committee of this project will take an action on the staff recommendation. And then from that will go to both Met Council and for Hennepin County for an action. And we're hoping it's an approval to go forward with it, but assuming that. So that's short term. A little bit longer term here moving forward is after our assumed action and is successful. We've gone through this 1 year of identifying that community supported route, but this summer now we would begin our environmental work for the project. So, a lot of folks, again, we are at the very beginning of this, the very beginning of work. Any of the design work that we've done is sub 5% of design. They're really nice pictures that show how things fit into context, but we have a lot of work to do. So we have to do our NEPA process, our environmental review, and that's where we're gonna document all the benefits and impacts of the project, and then determine if there's mitigation necessary and what that is, and get that into the design. Also, within probably about a year from now is when we'll have to address municipal consent for the project, when we're at about a 30% design. And so we'll seek that support from the cities and for the design process. And then right now, as we're doing environmental work, our engineering team will be feeding information and developing things so that we have enough information for an environmental review and start identifying locations of stations, how we get pedestrians and bicycles along the corridor and across the corridor, so we keep that connectivity. And then stationary planning happens at the same time, so it's a good time for our stationary planning that's working alongside the project for us to help them with the stationary planning, but also for the stationary planning to inform the project and our design. So that's the next 1.5 to 2 years as we're going through that process. Then we go into our, what we call full construction. So we start putting together constructible plans and documents. So we really start digging in it and rolling up our sleeves. We really work with our community partners in what we call issue resolution teams, where we're looking at where utilities go, how accesses work, and fine tune everything. Stationary planning continues along with that work here. And then we go into the construction period. So we have about 3 to 4 years identified for construction, assuming we get a full funding and grant agreement for the project. And our goal is to open this line in 2028. So.
So the part of is that we wanted to welcome our commissioners so that you all have a chance to hear from them, just because what we've been doing in this past 18 months has been very strongly in partnership, as seen by even the staff team in front of you today. So chairs, that's for
Yeah, that's, we've just covered a lot of information. Thank you, Sophia, Nick, Dan. And for those that are not as close to it, you realize how much work, we're at the beginning, but so much has been done. And this train is rolling. I mean, so if you hear that this is a project, and it's every month there's more that's picking up. So thank you so much. I would just make 2 quick points, and then we want to hear from our commissioners and maybe hear from our council members, because both Reva and Robert have been really engaged in this process as well. But first is that it's interesting, because this is a route modification, but this project has been part of the FTA, capital improvement program all along. And people sometimes ask, what's our relationship with the FTA? It's really good. And part of that is to know that we have not been kicked out and had to restart. We're in a special category. And
Party aboard.
TBD. It
Party
says in that.
aboard.
Okay.
I sometimes don't want to ask too hard whether it's that category. But the fact is that we're, you go so far in engineering, and then you're taking a step back. We're doing municipal consent, we're doing some NEPA process. But we're in a queue, which is really important when there's competitive fund for this federal support. But the second is to know that, and we're going to get into this, we're doing engagement like no other time. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And to be doing that during COVID, and when we think about our anti-displacement work, when we think about what Hennepin County and Met Councils, we're more about just building big trains and tracks. We are about community, placemaking, climate, and of course, housing affordability and access to jobs. And so we're taking a broader lens, and it really is exciting to think about how we've learned from these projects to take a larger kind of way to think about it. So having said that, maybe, I don't know, Reva, let's just go on. We want to hear from the stakeholders, not just from me. Go ahead, Reva.
Oh, thank you. This was a really good presentation, very comprehensive and just easy to understand the stages that this project has gone through. So hats off to Metropolitan Council, Hennepin County staff, and the cities and all of the planners that have gotten us to this point. The Blue Line Extension project is a project that is very near and dear to my heart. It was a big factor in my applying to the Metropolitan Council. I've been involved with this project since before 2010. So it's really nice to see it in this phase. There's a picture of me and several other people in the community of Brooklyn Park standing in front of a bus going down on a tour of the proposed Blue Line Extension project that we went on in 2010. So it's nice to see this project back in action and having that historical experience with this project. Thank you for providing the historical information, which we often don't hear about in terms of how we got to the disparities and how we want to remedy those disparities by being purposeful and having the anti-displacement committee working on some solutions for housing and solutions for making sure that we preserve, grow, protect, and build our cultural and community assets. And then finally, I'd like to say that as we work through the anti-displacement goals, that it not just be an exercise in research and understanding, that we are working in a manner that is agile to meet community needs, is purposeful, and that we're acting in good faith towards addressing and resolving solutions and providing opportunities for investments in these communities that have been underserved.
Thank you. Robert?
Oh, thanks. I was gonna defer to our guest, but sure, no, I just wanna really lift up everything that Councilmember Chambliss just said. Really thank the team that you see sitting here, Dan and Sophia, Nick, and then really call out Sam's work as well. And through a lot of the thick and thin of this, it was really Sam that was helping shape this, and Sophia's just come in and really picked up on that work. And I really want to thank the commissioners that are here, and they're both new commissioners, and it's really hard to imagine, for me to imagine. I think that the fresh perspectives that you brought and the experience, the deep experience with this project that you brought from outside the county, and that you brought into the county really made a huge difference in our ability to move this quickly and this in such a unified way. And so I just want to say thanks for that. This, I think I've said this before, I kind of cut my teeth in activism and politics around big transportation projects. And so I've been on the sort of the receiving end of so many of the pitfalls of these processes. And I just think this team and the county figured out how to avoid a lot of those pitfalls. There's going to be conflict. The parts of the proposed alignment that I represent are the ones that change the most. And so the communities had to adapt the most and to be flexible, and it wasn't without heartburn, and it still isn't without heartburn. But I will say, especially the North Minneapolis side, I was so impressed with the relationships that had already been built and the rapport with the community, and so the community could step into this process. They were very informed, very willing to explore new opportunities now that we're actually serving North Minneapolis communities, and they're at the table, and these guys know their business. They know what's going on there. It's very, very cool. In Robbinsdale, they kind of, in my opinion, they got kind of the short end of the stick, and they were just so perfectly poised on this project when it was aligned with the freight rail. There was a station right in downtown Robbinsdale that they'd invested in. It would have been just the jewel in the crown of economic development and development in that community. And so their plans got derailed, pardon the pun, but they're staying in the process. And the two big barriers that we had to face, I thought, in the beginning, and these guys just did great doing it, was community confidence, because this has already been, we were, I think, right before the preferred local alternative alignment when I was on the Minneapolis City Council. And so, as part of the conversation way back then, and so communities, there's so many opportunities to develop distrust. And these guys just really led with trust. I think it was Sam that always said, this project will move at the speed of trust. And
There's definitely a Samism.
yeah, that was a good one too, that was a good one. And then the last thing I'll just lift up is the anti-displacement work, as Reba said. And from being a community member, a city council member, that has always been a huge concern of mine, the impacts on the people and businesses and communities that are already there. And I feel like I've never seen such response to that. So resources and process and put into this anti-displacement conversation. I remember just having cage matches with Hennepin County back when I was in the Minneapolis City Council on the Lake Street layout, because I represented the East Lake Street, the section that was most vulnerable to displacement. That's what happened, not surprising, once we started construction. And so I'm just thrilled to see what comes out of that work. And as I understand it, FTA, others are really interested in that anti-displacement work, just because it hasn't been done that way before. So I just think, well done. There's still bumps in the road, and but I'm looking towards service in 2028 for sure. So thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. And now Irene, Jeff, you can fill in some gaps here.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Chair, members, I am near giddy. I mean, you're gonna have to peel me off this thing in 2028. I'll just ride the whole time. So truly, I just wanna thank you all for allowing us to be able to speak here. Thanks to staff, of course, shout out to Council Members Chambliss and LaGrange. A few things, we're here because of a modification. You know, we did not, the FTA did not have to give us the class of one categorization. So in 2019, 2020, when this effort really began around what does it look like to move from a rail corridor to a different right of way? You know, that's a big shift. What does that mean for communities, particularly Golden Valley, where I represent? And so shout out to Councilmember Johnson for that 55 PRT that was already kind of around. That actually really helped us a lot, while also expanding the map, you know, because by moving from something, it's not just where it's going to, but what you're moving it from. And there was a lot of hesitation around what does that mean? I happen to live right by the former Penn Station. And I've never seen this before, you know, North Minneapolis for a couple decades now, to move from a lot of skepticism to be basically people kind of arm wrestling for it to be closer to where they live. I mean, I've just really never seen that before. I mean, people on Lowry wanted it by them, and people on West Broadway wanted it by them, and that was such a, I think that's an expression of the robustness and the compassion and the values that our staffs kind of jointly were able to bring into the community in authentic ways, and so I hope the council feels really, really proud of that shared work. A few things I want to mention. Feds are really interested. You know, a couple decades ago, affordable housing was not included in the CIG scoring. So imagine in a decade where current residents and harm, historic harm can be part of the conversation, right? I don't know about how all the scoring goes, but to ensure that people who are local to where a project is occurring, that their voice matters, that their communities matter. As mentioned, I live in North Minneapolis. I keep pointing as if that's on a different slide, but anyway, you know, Robbinsdale downtown is a good example. Transit-oriented development was poured into Robbinsdale by council, by city, by Hennepin, and look at how vibrant that can be. So that can occur at every station. That can occur in communities all across the metro and certainly beyond, should we kind of see economic development as not this kind of destination to get to, but a journey that we're meant to take together. Because this is more about lines on a map. It's connecting folks to healthcare, to jobs. It's construction, jobs, and careers today with the continuity of projects, as well as the economic development. And yeah, if you were to visit where I live, I'm sure many of you have North Minneapolis neighbors. 2 full city wards, 80,000 residents. If we all wanted to have a post-committee of the whole meal on the north side, you couldn't do that. There is no place to sit down and have a meal. 80,000 residents. I'd be hard-pressed to find 80,000 residents anywhere in the state where you couldn't have a celebratory meal after a meeting or after a graduation or after some other life event. And that just should not be acceptable, and this team has demonstrated day in and day out that we can kind of be more than words. We can be about the outcomes of what's possible for residents. I mean, that's very moving for me. That is very, very, very moving for me. My neighborhood kids deserve a place to get their first job, a place where they can celebrate a baptism or a wedding, and I just really can't thank you enough for the possibility that you've offered my residents and my neighbors. Last few things. You know, the layover, I call it a really long, very robust layover. You know, when we started the route mitigation, remember we had all this like language coaching about what we're supposed to call it. It seemed like a long time to think 2 years from now, we would somehow be on the other side of some effort and there'd be another ream of paper for us to kind of add to the list. And wow, what a couple of years it's been. We have seen devastating impacts along lines of climate. that we are now getting to incorporate into this project. There are obviously inflationary pressures occurring, so a modified budget is in our best interest when we think of a 50-50 split, or with mega arrays, maybe up to 80%, right? Right, Administrator Bogey? I mean, that's what we're going for. That's what we're going for. There are options apparently from the feds where you can go up to 80%. That the feds would take on, and so with inflationary pressures, I mean, a revised budget is helpful. And then, you know, with climate, there's how we experience climate as people, but the development impacts, I'm sure you all are seeing this, the 50-year floodplain has moved so dramatically. We are seeing development costs skyrocketing because of the pressures needed for city ordinances. So we hope, I'm sure there's a we somewhere here, we hope that this project can take on some of the water storage that would help to ease environmental for residents, but also you know, municipal tax base for water mains, and then development opportunities for private and public. I mean, you can just see the cascading impacts are kind of never ending, and I just hats off to everyone here. So I believe there's a June tour. Councilmember Chambliss referenced a tour in 2010. I think we're shooting for a tour in 2022 sometime next month. Sam asked me when I was available. I literally responded with any day in this month. So I'm sure it'll happen. Would love for you all, legislators, et cetera. I really cannot thank you all enough for the commitment that you've demonstrated through this incredible award-winning work, if I may tout. I did not do the work personally, nor did I write the application, but I understand we won a couple awards off of this, and so I just, hats off to the team.
To follow up what the commissioner's saying, which may not, and maybe Sam brought this out, that we were suggested to apply for an American Public Works Association award in public engagement and
Oh, am I telling you about this?
diversity.
My bad.
No,
Am I announcing this?
Beautiful, okay, so you know.
Okay.
So,
Here at the council, so please.
yeah, so we were able to, and we were, interestingly enough, we were recommended to apply for award by the Public Works Director in Robbinsdale, right, one of our communities, and we did, Nick, kind of coordinated pulling an application together, and we submitted primarily our outreach efforts that were done by Sam and Sophia and Joan Van Hala and our team in outreach and diversity, and we won the national award. But you call them now the award-winning outreach.
Yeah, exactly. Do you like how I did that?
New adjective modifier.
Exactly. Well, yeah, so I talk a lot, Jeff calls a lot, so buyer beware for those that give your number to him. Just kidding, but not kidding. But really, this truly changes the trajectory of what's possible for myself and my neighbors. Like, I really, we say those words, but I mean, there are 0 places to eat dinner where I live. There is very limited tree canopy in our shared corridor. We have the highest transit-reliant populations. We have the lowest educational attainment above age 25. This will bring jobs and careers from construction to healthcare to education to everything in between. And I really cannot thank you all enough for the opportunity to be here and for our shared work. And so, anyway, Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, and just, for better or worse, this is our reign and ours number one party.
Yeah, exactly.
So I say worse because everybody's like, oh my God, what are you guys doing now? So our staffs are connected on this work. They meet constantly. There is no space between Irene and I. If I need Irene to cover a meeting or vice versa, we just cover because we spend so much time working together on this project. We've coined terms, the equity line. We were like, we're going to lay that down because we need to remind people at all times what this line represents. When you look at demographics, when you look at access to opportunity, you look at poverty, historical and real, this is it. This is right down the middle. You can't get more clear cut. I'm much more of a, I wouldn't say more of a fireball because Irene's a fireball too. I just like to call people out for listen. This year has been some news that's been challenging on Southwest, right? And we spent a lot of time on Blue Line talking about what are we going to do? People are like, oh, what are you going to do different? I meet with the Republicans. What are you doing different, Jeff? This is just going to be another. I think we should stand up, lean in, and celebrate what the heck we are doing here. Is that we're trying to provide opportunity. It's time for the Metro when we talk about after the murder of George Floyd, and we talked about equity, we talked about opportunity, this is the moment you actually do something. It's not, well, we had a meeting, we had a webinar, bullshit. This is the point, this is the point you do something.
Right.
And these are the people for which we speak of, and who we supposedly say we care enough that we want to deliver this. And, access to affordable transportation, it's not gonna solve everything, but it's a damn good start. And we are very passionate about that and trying to move that forward. I'm excited, this is awesome. I mean, in August of 2020, I was one of those mayors like, what the heck are you guys thinking? Like, unhappy would be a good, nice term. And you think about how far we've come. I mean, think about that. Sometimes we spend so much time in these large projects, we forget to stop and maybe celebrate just a little bit. Like, we've come a long ways. People are like, oh, it's gonna die in North Minneapolis. They're not gonna like it. I'd actually say our biggest fans are in North Minneapolis. People were talking about this. Robbinsdale has concerns. And we've spent a lot of time with them, and I'm not saying we have everything ironed out, but we did over 32 driveway meetings last year. We call them driveways because we weren't sure about COVID. We weren't sure about the vaccines, so let's make it non-threatening, we'll have it outside. And people dived in, and did people give us an earful? Absolutely, but what I came away with was, are some people excited about it? They're quiet. There are some people who are like, right? And then there are people who have a long list of things they want. But if you talk to people at these meetings, or even people who are the most negative, after the meeting's over, they'll always come up and say, well, if you're gonna do it, here's the 2 things you gotta take care of. I need you. And so even the people who are like, hell no, not here, have ideas about how to make things better. And so I think that's important that we continue to do that, and we listen to people. And I always tell people, when I work for Dell and Microsoft, the customer who hated you the most, if you flip them, what do they do? They love you the most. And so Robbinsdale wasn't a love of this project, and I think they're kind of, that flip is understandable because they had kind of all this vision was ripped out of their hands, and so people tend to boomerang, and so we just need to work with them, help them get it back. And so I'm confident, because what I haven't heard from anybody is, go away. People still show up in the meetings, even if it's to voice their concerns. But just a other couple of things, I definitely want to thank staff. I asked Dan, are you gonna be here for driveway meetings? And I know what I meant, I was shooting for over 24, and I didn't tell him that, and he's like, yeah, we'll be there. And so they were there all the time. And yes, Sophia, Sam, and Nick was there, and we were asking questions, but it was the best way to engage with people, because until people, they vent, they get what their frustrations are, they can't get to positive stuff, so
Sometimes they get snacks.
Yes, and the smallest meeting, there was only 2 people, the homeowners, but they had beer, and so that kind of made it all worthwhile at that point. Yes, yeah, no one drank any, we just looked. But I think that engagement, this summer, we'll be doing some more engagement. Councilmember Chambliss and I are gonna meet and talk about some of the stuff. I have 7 meetings, 5 of them are with people who are less enthused, as I like to call them. But we're gonna meet, we're gonna listen to them. And a couple of reminders on anti-displacement. So the biggest landowner on this route, City of Minneapolis. Second biggest, Hennepin County.
Yeah.
The third biggest is gonna be the properties that we acquire for construction. That is 3 groups that we can actually form the ability to drive the policies and the developments that would help the people who we are building this for to stay there, and the businesses. So we actually have a stake in the ground that we can actually say, when we say anti-displacement, we're not gonna trust the market, we're gonna help. We can start to do that. We can get nonprofits that buy properties, develop them. There are rules how we dispose of property, but there are ways to do that. So I'm kind of excited. We have the ability not just to talk about it, we can actually help deliver some of that, and we're working on that.
We have a meeting next week, Commissioner, with Hennepin County Tax Forfeit, who has identified, the tax forfeit properties along here are really expensive and have provide opportunities.
So we're gonna use that as one of the tools. So when people say, what can the county do, what can the Met Council do, we can do a lot in Minneapolis. And the other part is we can also make sure that we're listening to people who are gonna be affected, making sure that what we do is in their name and their view and their vision on that as well. So I'm excited. I think one of the challenges, if I can challenge the members of this room, including myself and Irene and everybody else, is we have a lot of people who are afraid to talk about transit. I spend most of my time when I lobby, because I'm co-chair of the IGR, talking to people who say they support transit, but then aren't really voting. And so we need to keep reinforcing, don't assume they know this, because a lot of them have said, people aren't working anymore, Jeff, why do we need this?
Yeah.
I'm like, are you crazy? The people who need this have continued to work for the last 2 years, in person, up front, in front of people, the nurses, the police, the fire, the retail, the restaurants, they haven't stopped. And so I would just ask you, if you've got legislators, don't assume it, and if they say they support it, ask them, because there's some bills coming through that want to zero out transit. And both parties voted for it. So the Senate bill was something, we're like, where was that transit number, right? And so I just ask you, as we do, just keep having that conversation, keep reinforcing that this line is important. And, you know, if we want to live up to what we've said, that we can do it. So I'm excited. I think this is awesome.
Jeff and Irene, thank you so much. I mean, you know, I'm just so happy you're displaying your passion, your expertise, and your partnership. I mean, you know, we've come a long way, and we have a long way to go. And by the way, this engagement, it keeps going. I mean, in a creative, and as you heard about, different.
Oh, I was gonna mention one more thing, and I apologize.
Sure.
Irene's, she always takes great notes, I just off the cuff, but we are working on what the equivalent of the Central Corridor had a funding collaborative that was to try to harness investments from outside.
The corridors of.
Yes. And so we're gonna try to do that on the Blue Line. We've got some people who were involved with Central Corridor who've given us some advice about when to start. It's a little early, but how to start it. So we're definitely gonna try to find some people to invest in this corridor, just like on Central, so not.
Well, and I would just kind of second what you said and know that these aren't easy. I mean, this is a big, we all are learning that. And I think that you have come with this great advice and willingness that we play offense. You know what? There's nothing to not be proud of. And having a shared vision and a commitment and a willingness to be like, hey, let's think out of the box. I mean, I love that. We're gonna, because we have a broader vision than just putting tracks on the road. And that was what's key. And I think that having, you know, that commitment, I know, and you're right, I mean, the Green Line extension, you know, these are tough for kind of taking it, you know, don't listen, I went to a dinner and they said, wow, have you listened to that? I was like, no, I can't listen to that. You know? They were not saying kind things about Mayor Council. But, you know what? We're still smiling and we're just marching along. And you know what? We're doing actually pretty well, remarkable that North Minneapolis is having that access. And you know, Irene knows this, maybe Judy, you know, I'm a bus guy. And I tell you what, my most committed passengers and customers were those that actually were broken down on the side of the road. And we took such good care of them, they became like, hey, you know what, you figured something out that's so important. So I just think we had that opportunity.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thanks. It just has a bit of a quote on all this conversation, and is that when the alignment shift, you know, there were expectations, opportunities, community interest developed along the former alignment, and so those conversations are still going on, and I think it's incumbent upon us. I just kind of want to make everyone around this table aware.
This is not going to be easy.
Right.
We're talking about Robbinsdale.
Yeah.
Just like
Robbinsdale, the reclaim or 6th.
Harrison neighborhood.
That's where
and
several
Golden
are
Valley
heading, I
are two
think,
spots
after
there.
right. So there's more, even that's not directly related to this alignment decision, there's still.
well, and council members, thank you for being so patiently listening to those of us. And I happen to know that none of you are very shy, so you know, if you have any questions, thoughts.
Really great presentation, love the passion. I can't wait, Commissioner Fernando, when BRT is your #1 project on 55, to get this done, and then and I have to, again, for both commissioners, but especially my commissioner, she stepped up on projects that weren't even in her district because they had language for so long, but now we have Commissioner Anderson too, so she's a champion for the things that throughout the whole region, and I appreciate that support. I just have to impress too, I'm sure you're working with the business community, the West Broadway Business Association. I remember Green Line going down University and, you know, those individual restaurants and store owners, it was difficult. I remember when 394, you know, gutted a lot of businesses. So we all appreciate those job creators and anything we can do to not only help them stay there, but if there can be some funders that come together that maybe help them become the owners of the properties if they're not the owners, right? That's where true wealth and economic expansion can help generationally and throughout the whole community. And I know we really haven't touched on safety. You know, we gotta continue and thank you to our chair here who served on the safety task force as we look at how to make transit more safe. That's important, because I am hearing from people too, why are you doing more when you haven't figured that out? My daughter lives in Robbinsdale, I must say, she's not excited about the project, we have some spirited conversations. But, you know, it's a process for people because.
driveway.
Yeah, no, she does not, it's an alley, you can go right down the alley.
Okay, we could have an alley.
But I think for some people, it's one or two things that they don't understand or they don't know what we're doing, and so the outreach, I really have to commend you on that. I you know, was an onlooker until Maple Grove said, we want a spur. So now I'm very engaged, and I know that that's not part of what we're looking at tonight, and I've been assured by Sam and others that it doesn't put Maple Grove out, that we are still at the table with them. We would need to keep this, lots of puns, on track. But I really want to say that the city of Maple Grove early on really was at the table when we were looking for the routes to begin with. And there were routes that went into downtown Maple Grove, into their transit station, which of course Jefferson Lines is stopping at regularly. It's fantastic. I used to work there back in the day as a tour planner. So I'm just saying that one of my communities is super excited about potentially getting a spur off of this or some way to connect, because I've got communities up to Rogers who are excited about connecting future bus service or into this. The employers up there are, it's a corridor of commerce, and they can't get enough people up there to the jobs. You all know that, you hear from the employers too. So I am gonna be there along the way when we can figure that next leg of service out, because that's gonna serve even a lot more communities as we continue to go up into the Northwest region, but for sure the whole region. So thanks for all your hard work. I know it is not easy. Been at some of this stuff for 20 years myself, and I'm just grateful that you really have a serious process involved here, because there's going to be some, you know this, they're really tough times when people see stuff happening in front of their home or their store. By the way, Tootie's is still a very good place to eat. And just being there in a compassionate way, and I can see you've already demonstrated that. So I'm just grateful and feel good about where it's going.
Anyone else?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter. Thank you, great presentation. I know we're just starting the environmental review part of this project, and I did not hear the word tunnel anytime today. That's probably a good thing.
Or will not be using the
Or
word.
co-location of the.
Yeah, collision wall or anything like that.
All these words that only this room really knows about.
High points, yeah, but are there anything around the environmental that kind of, I guess, is there anything that keeps you up at night right now? And I'm kind of thinking around that environmental review aspect of it.
And I think the two pieces of the environmental process that will be key here is the area in and around environmental justice, which is a little different than we even really got into before, because the communities where we're building are there. And then the other one that's an environmental impact that you don't really think of, but we do have to touch on, at least in the documentation, are construction impacts. And the construction impacts are much different now, because this is still like 13 miles, right, Nick? And it's about 12.5 miles of street running LRT, right? So we're building streets in front of businesses and residences and homes, very much like Central Corridor. And so impacts during construction and how to keep people getting into doors, getting into parking lots, accessing construction, keeping the businesses going. That's gonna be a big piece. Now the environmental, and that's not we'll still have noise, we'll have vibration, we'll have water, we'll have air, we'll have all those things, but I think the biggest is gonna be those two, primarily around this construction impacts piece.
Great, thank you.
Oh, our chair of our transportation committee, Councilman Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really just want to commend all of you. I was at a lot of those conversations back in 2019 and 2020, which were very hard, and it would have been easy to throw up hands and just, say we have to come up with something completely different. But it was really a lot of really fine commitment from the team. Definitely, the team at Met Council, Metro Transit, teams at Hennepin County. Cannot thank you enough, because I think what we have now is not only a route modification, you've really revisioned this entire project in my mind. When you look at it, you mentioned that importance of talking about transit. You've given us lots to talk about. It's easy to go out and talk about how this is so connected to the communities, especially with all the engagement that we've seen so far. So really impressed, and really thank you for everyone for all the hard work. One other comment I wanted to make about the anti-displacement work. So every year, at least before COVID, went to Revolution, and one of the things, we have mobile workshops. And I always went every time to one of those mobile workshops to an area that had been affected by displacement. And because I thought it was so important to see what different cities were doing, different regions were doing. And really the takeaway is nobody has it figured out. And I think the work that you're doing with this can be really what defines how projects like this do that kind of work going forward. And so I don't think it's likely the last award that will be won by this project, but I think that is, I really think that is going to be changing for the entire country. So I'm really impressed with that as well. Thank you.
Revolution is a great idea.
That is a good idea, put that down.
Chair, if I may, just one thing to share with you also is both Congressman Phillips and Congresswoman Omar and our U.S. senators have talked about the getting what those earmarks, that dirty word that now is called something else that I forget all the time, but using that to kind of advance some of that work. And so they've been talking about that as supporting our work in small ways, where $500,000 to the city of Robbinsdale for something, which they didn't get, but those type of things is dramatic. And so I think those things, and you're seeing a lot more activity with our members of the federal delegation to say, what can we do, and getting very specific, because they can now, so.
Go ahead, Philip.
Thank you. I think it's great. I come from, my mom came up with like small Nicollet, Minnesota, rolled streetcars from lived in Roy Park and had a job in St. Paul. So it's been, transportation is really important. I don't want to rain on the parade, but I want to kind of echo what Councilman Johnson said, but I'm worried about safety issues. And I know like St. Louis just put $52 million into a turnstile and other security issues. And some people will say that that's one of the issues. And I know we have safety within the neighborhood and people that don't want to, use a light rail. And so some of it is just trying to find out what that connection is, both locally and then within our system as well. But I think that's important that we have, like I worked on the red line early on, and one of our points was like, would a soccer mom ride this system and be on board? And I don't know, I can't give that answer as being a solid yes right now. And so I'd like us to really look at it when we're looking at our planning. And I think a lot of it is also engaging with the businesses that kind of put up with, where like university was kind of slam dunk, where we had a real vibrant community. A lot of those businesses suffered, and if we could kind of work with them and through construction and see where that's going to make a big difference on how we go forward. Because sometimes I feel like some projects where the businesses are left laying, whether it's the Outlook Center in Egan, where 163 small businesses got left, and now we got another Simon Mall that's owned by the Mall of America just south of there with all these big ones. So it's kind of important the few you have in, like the Camden Tavern or the Barbara's or the Tory 44, that they're involved with staying in there and then help with hardware stores and the barbers and things like that. But that's why I'm able to have us look at that. That's important, but it's exciting that we're bringing that forward to the hospitals and Robbinsdale, et cetera. So thanks for your work.
Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've been around for the first iteration of this project too, and it's interesting to see the change in North Minneapolis, where the first time around, people were saying, no, there's not room, it can't go through here and everything, and I heard a lot of comments about how it was a missed equity opportunity to go around North Minneapolis rather than through it, so it's good to see that that's being embraced this time around. I did have a couple of questions it's great that there's a lot of interest in the anti-displacement work. Are the meetings going to be streamed or recorded so that, because I looked in the website that you guys had, and the one from March 10th said it was a webinar, and when I clicked on the link, now that the webinar's done, you can't watch it, but having an opportunity for people to see the guts of the discussion, even if they can't attend the meetings, would be helpful. I don't know if that's in your plan or not.
I thought
Yeah, so
they
the,
were saved on My Blue Line
yeah,
XT.
so we have a partner website with the Hennepin County, My Blue Line XT, they're recorded, so we'll make sure they're up there for folks to see. And we're working with Kira right now for the big Saturday session to both stream and record. Maybe you don't want to watch 8 hours of it, but
Well, no.
yeah, it'll be available. One of the things that
Unless
we'll-
you do.
One of the things
You can
that we'll
fast forward.
we got the community feedback as well. As one of the things that we'll do is we'll actually write up a summary of the meeting, kind of like a highlight reel, just because a full day is a hard thing to consume, but people really want to see the outcome. So we have some staff lined up to do that, and we'll make sure that it's on My Blue as well.
And that'll be on blueline@ext.org.
We link to the shared project page. Right, it's missing. Yep.
Maybe having time markers of when
There
things
we
are,
go.
so you don't have to
Okay.
watch all 8 hours, but
Good note.
having that opportunity to see it, even if you can't go sit at the meeting, and people pretty much expect that now.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yeah, you should be able to access everything now,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then my other question is, at what point in this process do we redo the ridership estimates?
Love that question.
Let me answer that. I mean, we need to know a little more about, just what now we kind of know the alignment. We do. We now presented in this report, and this becomes adopted. Now, we're gonna there'll be some discussion during the environmental process. Are these the stations? Are we gonna have any more stations? Are these the stations? Right now, the recommendation is these are the stations, because obviously stations and then where the route's gonna go and how it interacts with traffic and such are two big drivers. End of the year? Early next?
Or probably early winter time 2023, so not quite a year out, but as we start approaching our 30% plans prior to municipal consent, we'll do our ridership studies.
Okay, thank you.
I was just, go ahead, go ahead, Remus, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make one final comment, because, Brooklyn Park is a city where I live in my district. And because we're so far ahead in terms of having our route set and our station areas pretty much set, maybe some adjustments, I would like to see us increase the energy and excitement for the city of Brooklyn Park, not from a reactionary or chiming in on what's happening in Minneapolis or Robbinsdale to what are we going to be doing since we have a head start in the city of Brooklyn Park to move the project forward and take advantage of that opportunity for the head start. And that's part of the reason why I'll be meeting with Commissioner Lundy and also some of the Brooklyn Park staff so that we can take a look at all of the things that we've learned from the Green Line project and move plans forward for the community towards their goals.
That feeds me into what your point, Commissioner Lundy.
Well, I was just gonna add, Councilor Johnson, that adding Maple Grove, connecting to it, whether it's a spur, whether it's a bus connection, changes ridership potentially, because are they gonna wanna run buses downtown when theirs is much more of a commute, and they're probably have a higher percentage of laptop classes, I like to call them, who aren't going downtown as often. So I think there's potential for ridership to actually increase, because we're gonna connect in some of the Rogers, some of the other development that we didn't have 7 years ago that now we do, that I think the numbers will actually go up, and clearly we need to nail it down, but I think it'd be good stuff.
And may I just, and so for my 20-some years in city government, there was a lot of anti-transit or thinking different, we've all been there, right? It's changed completely in my communities. And so that's exciting, but then you know, the opportunity is also a problem because they want it faster than we can do it, right? So we'll be working on that. And just my last point would be that as we continue to take on these projects, when they're ready to operate, Met Council's gotta have the money to operate them. And so, you know, we know that there are cliffs that we keep somehow magically, you know, getting through, over, around, or pushing out into the future, but it's a real thing. And I don't think most people really understand what we're up against. And so there are other projects that will continue to come online, but, you know, as a Met Council member and chair of management, it's just like how you figure this out, right? With all of our partners, the legislature, who's not always thrilled about giving us more money, and certainly the feds have been great partners. So, you know, I lose a little sleep about that every now and then, but that's a bigger picture item.
Yeah, definitely, I hear you on the being properly used. So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I just wanted to mention that I'm hearing several North Minneapolis restaurants be named, so I see you, I heard that you heard me and I hear you. So I was caught, you know, I'm kind of, because the comment I make when I say you can't have a sit-down meal or places to eat, but that's kind of the point, that there aren't like, you know, you go to other areas, there's many, you can just walk down a sidewalk and stumble upon, but I just want to acknowledge that I heard some North Minneapolis restaurants named, thank you. But safety is what keeps me up at night. I mean, from an environmental standpoint, it's certainly watershed. It's certainly water, but precipitation, climate, the way that we've been seeing those patterns. But I just want to acknowledge that the safety piece keeps me up at night as well, because, you know, this line is centering an additional transit user. You know, it is centering the single parent with a car seat and a few bags of groceries. People who are not always choosing transit, people that might even purchase a car if they had the means to do that. And I say that with immense compassion because my neighbors, whether there's a line there or not, are as many as we're seeing nationally. There are more acts of hate that are occurring, and that it certainly intersects with transit use. And I just want to acknowledge that. Something that I hope to bring online at some point. I want to look at college campuses that have decreased actions of, you know, whether it's robbery or assault. You know, there's college campuses that have kind of had to face this type of question, the question that we're facing at stations. There are other areas that have had to face that question, so I'm trying to think a little creatively, but I'm open to suggestions. Where are places that we can look at where, you know, the walk shed has increased, and therefore opportunities for petty or violent crime have perhaps also increased. And so then what are we also doing to keep folks safe, and for us in all seasons, right? That's also not the case in all areas. I just want to really acknowledge that, and that's not something to gloss over or to brush under anything. Safety of all types must be a really, really top priority, and want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, if I can add on is, so Irene and I both serve on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. I chair the Public Safety Committee, so we are constantly looking at safety is not just personal, it's also justice and being treated fairly. And so we're constantly looking at that, and I would say at the county where I know Irene and I are serving on subcommittees to really look at that, and I'll just offer, you know, if any council members wish to have a conversation, at least on the county, Hennepin County side, on public safety, give me a ring, because we're having lots of quiet conversations, so we can certainly we will get through this by working together, by collaborating, and that's tough to do sometimes, because it's easier to point fingers, because it's faster and quicker than, but if you're in the Hennepin County, we'd love to.
Thank you for that expression of interest. I mean, it is all of our minds. I know Councilmember Chambliss has been chairing this work study group, working with our police, but also our larger kind of engagement on the operating system. We worked with the Citizens League to find what does it, into this whole idea of having a welcoming, safe environment. I mean, if we're not taking care of our customers in our community, but we don't do that alone. We do that in collaboration with our cities, with counties, and
Chair, for us as a project team, I mean, we will acknowledge that's the number one thing we hear.
Yeah.
For people that support it, for people that don't support it, for people that are on the fence, all across the board, we really want this.
No question.
We met with some businesses in Robbinsdale and they said, we are all supportive of, the LRT line and we're supported above it on 81. But if there's a station there, we're a little bit nervous.
Yep.
What
Sure.
will be part of it? So they want to see it, but they're just a little hesitant. And so,
Here, LRA, BRT.
And I just would have to say too, the other population I'm hearing from because of age-friendly Maple Grove, you know, they wanna make sure that transit services are safe for seniors. As seniors, you know, also don't have or the ability to drive or whatever, and that population's very nervous right now about transit. So, you know, we just have to think about the whole span of life, you know.
Any other questions, Lynn?
That brings up the issue of maintenance and snow removal as well, because I've been a transit-dependent person and climbing over those little mountains of snow at every corner in Minneapolis can be very dangerous, or having a puddle that then freezes, so you're walking across 6 feet of clear ice. You know, you can have all of the ADA accessible ramps in the world, but if it's covered with snow or ice, it's not very useful. Are you guys making sure you have that as part of your plan as well?
As we're in design and looking at responsibilities, that is one of the first discussions that we have with our project partners of ownership and how we're gonna maintain it, you know, as far as the design, but then who's gonna maintain it. And that is.
we are building a
Yeah.
Met Council transit line almost exclusively in Hennepin County streets. So we should be able to have the right people.
Coordination, it's a
there.
little easier.
I think, I hope.
Well, that was one of the benefits of this right away.
There's some advantages to that. Yeah.
If you think we're loud in this room, imagine us.
So,
In our
I
own
mean-
walls, we're pretty noisy.
So yes, those are great points. And then we got a lot of them right on Central Quarter, on Green Line, and we missed a few, and we know that, and so we know where to start to address some of those.
Oh, yeah.
But we'd like to refer all questions to Commissioner Anderson, because he runs community work, so anybody not happy about snow removal, there's another commissioner,
I'm
so,
gonna tell him you said that.
yes, please do. He'll appreciate the work.
Sadly, you don't have anything to do with Hennepin Avenue.
Yes.
We're dealing with. Any other, no, go ahead, Francisco.
Oh, thank you. My district is District 12, which is Washington County, the way east of the metro area. But I work on the Minneapolis Public Schools Central Building right there on West Broadway and Girard. So can we have a station there?
Very close, yeah. Great question.
Now, so you see the station
Excellent
as
question.
we've identified it as West Broadway, Emerson, Fremont area, right? Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to serve the businesses. We're trying to connect to D-Line. D-Line will be right on Emerson, Fremont, so that's a north-south connection there. So it'll be somewhere, it will not be far from the data center, I can say that.
And just a couple of observations. One is Sammy's Eatery. That's a great place to eat. It's right there on Broadway.
Best chicken sandwich.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the second observation, a little bit more serious, is that we work with children and families, and this has been a few very tough years on those communities in North Minneapolis. And we see that. We see how the number of things that have happened have an effect on the children, which are our students. So I talk to them and to their families on a daily basis about issues. And having this project, I think it shows that we care about that community. And I think it will give hope to some of those families that we're trying to address the historical disparities that have an impact on the children of today. So this is not what happened in 1930, this is what's happening in 2022 and will continue to happen in 2032 unless we do something about it. So having that commitment of effort and money and a major project, I think will give hope in addition to the actual effects on easing transportation and economic development, etc. One last point is that I knowing that community, having worked there for 6 years and walked that street so many times, I will be very interested in knowing the I'm gonna call it gentrification, side effects of this. I mean, I know that you don't have, we don't know exactly what might happen, but that there's some lessons from existing light rail projects I see here on the anti-displacement timeline. At least a worst case scenario and a best case scenario of what we know at this point would be interesting to see. I mean, I would love to see those scenarios played out, and then we can flesh it out with additional information down the road. But yeah, thank you, and great project.
Well, to your point, educational opportunities, it takes 90 minutes for a student who's at North Hennepin to get from Robbinsdale to North Hennepin Community College, one way. And so you talk about opportunities to ride that light rail to get to North Hennepin or to Hennepin Tech, can be 15 minutes. Imagine your life if you went from 90 minutes to 15 to get to your classes, and the fact that they plan their day around their bus schedules versus they can hop on right at that stop. So
Many of our high school students take the bus too, so
Yeah.
they can use the light rail, that'll be great. Thank you.
Great conversation. Thank you, everybody, for kind of leaning into this. Thank you to our guests for coming to St. Paul, to Ramsey County, and engaging with us.
way to pay a toll.
Well, we have kids.
We've arranged for diplomatic immunity.
I feel it, it's a long drive.
Right, having just had a meeting in St. Louis Park, that was kind of a quick thing. We've learned now during travel time, something called travel time. If that's it, we're gonna meet again next week, another in-person meeting. I just want to kind of acknowledge that unbeknownst to me, that today is actually part of the Eid, which is kind of the third day and the end of Ramadan fasting. And this was why Abdi Mousse is not here today. And I think we don't get everything right. And I just want to acknowledge that this is a religious holiday that kind of escaped us. We're getting better at that, but I just want to kind of make sure that everybody knows that that's something. So when you see Abdi, we mentioned to him when we thought of him and that celebration. And I also have learned that I can't just have the power to adjourn a meeting. We need a vote. Otherwise,